Welcome to the Writer Groupie Podcast. I'm Kim Smith, the writing guru, bringing you discussions, insights, and insider details on planning, producing, promoting, and profiting as a writer. This is a podcast by writers for writers. You can find out more about Writer Groupie at www.writergroupie.net. And here's the next episode of Writer Groupie. Groupie Dan. This is Dan Stout, you guys. So welcome to the show. You're going to be my guest for episode 78. And I want you to tell my fan base all about Dan Stout and your new book, TITANSHADE.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be on here, especially right as you kind of kick everything back into full gear on the show.
I know, right? I was so excited when you contacted me. I was like, yes!
It was just perfect timing. As you mentioned, my book is called TITANSHADE. It's my debut novel, and it comes out on March 12th from Dahl Books, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. And it is a noir fantasy thriller with a 1970s feel.
It does, definitely.
It is. I'll tell you, it's just one of those things. I loved writing this book, and I love telling people about it. It is so much fun to take these different genres and feels that I know and love and just kind of mash them together into something that's even more fun. It's, like I said, it's a noir fantasy thriller, and it follows a police procedural format, but it's set in a secondary world. So the idea is like a Middle Earth or another world of that nature, where eventually these places, they always start off as these medieval faux European places, but eventually they'll develop technology, they'll develop skills, they'll develop the internal combustion engine, they'll start to have urbanization, and they're going to need infrastructure, and that means they're going to need a police force. So I had a chance to really play with all these, and yeah, I'm just really excited to kind of bring it to the world and see what people think about it.
Well, I'm just too thrilled for you. Forever and ever struggled with trying to find an agent and go the whole traditional publishing route, and it just wasn't going to happen. And I feel like, I would be in my grave before I'd ever get my first book published. So I just went the indie route and was just as happy as, and pleased as punch. But not to say that I wouldn't ever try and do that again if I thought that I could be successful. You are really an inspiration to me because, you got to start somewhere. And then when you obtain the pinnacle, basically, which to me, New York Publishing is still the pinnacle. And it just feels good. It feels good for me to see you and say, yes, you did it. I wish I could have done it. I didn't, but you did, and I can cheer you on.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I loved what I read. It's just, it's good. It's just really good. And I don't know how much I want to give away, but the victim, let's just put it that way, that was such a surprise. It had that very much a noir police procedural feel to it going along, and then we get into the crime scene, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, we're not in Oz anymore. So how did you come to write this book? What inspired you to write it?
The genesis behind TITANSHADE came from a website called Liberty Hall, and it's not around anymore, but when it was a site where you could log in, and once a week they would put up a prompt. When you hit the button to get the prompt, you'd have 90 minutes to write it, and then we logged in, and everybody who wrote for that week would get to read it and critique it and give notes. And the thing that was beautiful about it, so you knew it wasn't going to be that. And all of us were able to just dive in, do the best we could, and produce the best work we could in 90 minutes and just have fun with it.
Oh, wow. That sounds like fun.
Honestly,
I don't know that I could do as well as you apparently have done in 90 minutes. It seems like it takes me 90 minutes to get my coffee cup and my, my ideas gathered, my notes or whatever, but that's interesting.
Yeah, it was a really great site, and I kind of had the genesis of the story, and most of that first chapter is more or less what I got when I first sat down, and it just struck me as the kind of story that I wanted to write. And you always hear that advice to write what you want to read, and it just clicked with me right away, and I knew I was going to fall in love with it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I was writing a fantasy and my son read a little bit of it and he told me, he said, Mom, he said, that's so yesteryear. He said, you need to write a fantasy that's different from everybody else. He says, write a fantasy about a giant rabbit. So I wrote a short story about a giant rabbit who was jailed, and he was telling the jailer his story about how he came to be enchanted and in this jail cell. And it was the most fun because I knew nobody was ever going to read it, first of all. And secondly, it was pure fantasy, completely out of my head fantasy. But that sometimes is what we need as a writer to get the flow going. Sometimes we just need to get out of our own way. Have you ever had any challenges like that?
Oh, absolutely. You can overthink a story or overthink a scene to death. And sometimes you need to shake up your structure. You need to sit down and write things out longhand, or you need to grab a microphone and dictate for a little bit, or just do something to get yourself out of that rut, into a new element, and rediscover the fun.
Yes. And that's what makes writing a novel especially fun to me, is that sometimes the story just goes off in a direction you never anticipated, and sometimes you have to rein it back in, but sometimes you just let it go and it becomes the story of your dreams. You never had an inkling that that was where it was going to go. And so that's just the beauty of being able to write in any form, but especially a long form, I think. So what is your favorite part of this book? When you were writing this book, what was your absolute favorite part?
Oh, that's such a great question. I would have to say it was the interplay between the different characters, the hero, the sidekicks, and all these people. Each one of them had a little spark, get them in the room together. I would see it sort of jump out, just getting that static electric off it, something, and seeing those characters connect with each other in that way was just magic for me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and sometimes you read a book and its characters just step off the page for you, and then sometimes you read a book where the plot just grips you by the throat and you can't put it down. And sometimes you get it all. And I kind of have an inkling that your book is one of those that has a little bit of it all. You have a true fantasy setting, but it's so familiar because it's set in, I won't say modern time because it's not, but it's set in a setting that you recognize. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
How hard was it for you to piece that together like that? That's almost like a patchwork quilt when you're thinking, in your head, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to have to make this a little historical. So let's pick an era, 1970s. Oh, yeah, it's going to be fantasy. Let's throw in some police procedural. You kind of get it all. And I mean, how did you plan that out? How did that happen?
It was both a challenge and a lot of fun. Partly because now the beautiful thing, it is a fantasy. So if I need to cheat a little bit, I can. I don't need to have a purely historical police procedural.
Right.
But the catch to that is, as I'm going and making stuff up, I have to make note of everything that I'm adding in and playing with, because I have to stay true to that through the rest of the story. Keeping pace with that is difficult, but again, it is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I
remember Brandon Sanderson saying something about world building and magic systems, and how you have to be really careful, especially with magic systems, because you got to remember what you were thinking when you created it at the beginning of the book and keep it true throughout, so that at the end of the book, the reader can follow your whole plan there. Smart man, Mr. Sanderson.
Yep, it's hard to argue with that.
I recently had the opportunity to meet a mystery and suspense writer who is very, very popular, and he is actually the man who is finishing the series or the books for Tom Clancy. And it was just interesting to get to meet him and learn how he stepped into another person's world. You know, do you ever think about collaborative works? Have you ever moved that far ahead in your mind with your book to say, I wonder if I'd ever collaborate with anybody with these characters?
I have never thought about collaborating with this story in this world, but I would love to do that. I love the collaborative experience. I love the give and take of brainstorming and knocking around ideas to make something that's a sum is greater than the whole. And I would very much like to do something like that, whether it's in a web series or a shared universe book at some point down the road. But for this one, I think I want to keep this just me for now.
Well, and you know, is this going to be a series? I meant to ask you that.
Oh, yep. I'm working on the sequel right now. I don't have a release date for it, but I'm struggling through. I've got that sophomore book blues, trying to figure out how to make it all work. But
you know,
it's been a good experience.
My first book was a breeze. My second book was okay. My third book, I struggled and struggled and struggled, and still to this day, even up before I published it, ended up changing the ending completely with a lead into a fourth book. And now I absolutely cannot write this fourth book. I have been working on this book for 5 years. Of course, now you know my story. You know, I've gone through some stuff, and that was a great, you know, big interrupter. But it's just like, goodness, you know, how do you stretch it out? I think about people like Sue Grafton and Janet Ivanovich, and when somebody has a lengthy series like that, I don't know how they can sustain it. I guess my character, from the time I ended maybe the second book, by the time I got into the third book, had started evolving in my mind. And so by the time I was finished with the third book, I wanted this character to be and do more things. And so now the fourth book, I'm just kind of like, you really want it to have the same type of trajectory as the other books, but your characters have got to grow at some point and change. How do you keep that? How do you keep it so if reader comes back, but different so that they come back? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I've been trying to get my head around that, because I can imagine a character who grows and expands over the course of several books, but having somebody writing book 2, knowing that not everybody will have read book 1 is difficult, because I have to present those basis of that character in a way that's engaging for new readers, but not boring for old readers. And that was always a pet peeve of mine when I was reading series. I would feel like, okay, I know this part, and I would just want to skip ahead or hit the fast forward button, essentially, and page ahead. And I want to avoid that. So finding ways that I can establish the base character while wrapping it in something new. So it's like, you know, wrapping a nougat in chocolate and giving it so that all sets of readers will enjoy it.
I understand. I do. You know, and I'm reading a series right now. I don't know if you've ever read any of Louise McMaster Bujold's books. I was introduced to her over the summer, and I am just in love with this writer. Her first book that I read is the first book in the Sharing Knife series, and it was wonderful. And at the end of that book, they put a little snippet of the first chapter for the next book. And so when you could read, it was kind of funny because I read that snippet. I usually don't do that. I usually go straight to the next book and I'm done. But I read a snippet at the end of the first book. So when I started reading the second book, I had forgotten that I read the snippet. And I thought that they had made a mistake because it was so familiar. I'm like, I've already read this. This was in the last book. Why are they repeating this? But it was a clever thing to do, because there might be a lot of people who read that snippet and base their decision to purchase the next book on that snippet. And so it's a really, really good series. I'm really enjoying it. And I do read such a different variety of books. I mean, I read fantasy and romance and historical and mystery. I just read everything. And so reading your first chapter was just a phenomenal opportunity for me, because I'm reading a fantasy and I'm kind of like, I want to do more fantasy now. I'm kind of in that fantasy mode. So you came along at the right time with the right book, and I really, really am going to enjoy reading that one. I'm going to get that one. So I'm
Fantastic. Thank you.
I'm a fan. So, you know, I hate to do this to us because it seems like we're just getting started, but we're going to have to wind it down eventually. And I always want to give my guests an opportunity to tell the audience where they can find your work. Advertise yourself and your book at this point. You know, give us your website info, tell us where we can find the book, give us all that detailed stuff that a reader needs to know.
Thank you for that opportunity. You can find me at www.danstout.com. That's DANSTOUT. And I'm on I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and I'm always either at Dan Stout.
DanStoutWriter.com.
The book itself is on all the major buying platform, Facebook at Dan Stout Writer, because some other Dan Stout snuck in there and snapped up the name before I did.
That's like me. I'm Kim Smith, but there's some beautiful swimsuit model that I keep getting confused with, and I love it.
The book itself is available on all the major platforms, so your Barnes & Noble and Amazon. You can check it out on Target or Walmart, and it'll be in bookstores like Barnes & Noble and most local independent bookstores. And if anybody wants to check it out and not shell out some money, you can always go to the library and request it there, and they will be glad to order it in for you.
That's wonderful. I really am so excited about that. And, you know, I'm going to have to do a lot of promotions for you. I'm going to have to get a copy of the book and flash it on all the social media sites. You know, that's what fans do.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited, and I'm excited to really fan out when I hear the audio version. I know that's in production right now, and I think it's going to be great. Now, you've read, from the stuff that you read, I know you'd probably agree with me. It's got a perfect tone and just perfect for an audiobook, I think.
Oh, yeah. Do you know who your voice author will be?
Michael Naramore. And it's coming out through Brilliance Audio, and I expect it to be on all the usual places you can download audiobooks.
Oh, you need to send me an email, let me know when that's out, because I would love to hear that. That's, you know, you think noir, you think that really sultry kind of a tone, and that'll be exciting. I'll really enjoy that. Well, I am at the point now where I got to ask you this question, because you and I always have been an aspiring writer until now. Now we're no longer aspiring, but there are writers out there who are still aspiring, and they're hanging on your every word, and they want to hear advice from you. Since you've reached the traditional publishing pinnacle, they want to know, what did you do? How did you do it? You know, give me something here. Throw me a lifeline. So give them some advice.
The best advice I can give is put your heart on the I just don't think there's no point in learning to be subtle until you've learned to be honest. Write what you feel, write what you honestly believe, and write what can be even sometimes a little painful for you. And that honesty and clarity will come through for the reader. And it may not resonate with everybody, but man, the people that it does resonate with, it will click like you would not believe.
Is wonderful advice, wonderful advice. And, you know, writers need to remember that it's not always about publishing. You're a writer first before you're ever an author per se, quote unquote. And you need to do this because you love to do it, and you wouldn't care whether you ever made a cent at it. And that is where that honesty will come out on the page, I think, is if you're real with yourself and realize you're doing this because it's in you and it just got to come out. You know what I'm saying? So Absolutely. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that little bit of information, because that advice will just go forever. You know how podcasts are evergreen, so that's your advice to the world forever.
There we go. Well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to share it, Kim. I really appreciate it.
Well, I am so happy to have had you on the show, Dan, and this is how we'll do it. We'll create a podcast. We'll also do a video on YouTube, although the video is probably going to be pretty stinky. I'm sorry, you guys, if y'all are watching this and it didn't turn out very good. We'll also do a blog post. So there'll be text, audio, and video so that people can consume the media in the way that they like to consume it. And I'll have all of your links, and they'll be able to find you. You'll be out there everywhere.
Fantastic. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting my copy of TITANSHADE, and I'm just so excited. I can't wait to be a part of that new publication that's coming out with your name on the cover. So I hope you'll plan on coming back and being on Writer Groupie again with your next book. You may be episode, 100, but hey, I want you to come back.
I would love to come back. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This episode is brought to you by Leslie Hatchell's Once Upon a Tablecloth. The product description reads, Nick Jordan acquires failing restaurants, then makes them prosperous. But when Lily Mercer calls him for help, he didn't count on falling in love, or that someone wants to kill her. And with so many obstacles and threats, can she survive? Can there love? Once Upon a Tablecloth by Leslie Hatchell. You can find more about Leslie and this book, Once Upon a Tablecloth, at lesliehatchell.com. And that's Hatchell, H-A-C-H-T-E-L. Once Upon a Tablecloth is available at Amazon in paper and for Kindle.
Infinity Author Services for your author services needs. We create professionally designed book covers as well as provide editing, promotions, update your social media accounts, and WordPress sites. Let Infinity Author Services increase the exposure for your novels with our exciting promo packages. You can find out more at infinityauthors.com. Infinity Author Services for the indie author in you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Writer Groupie. For booking information, show notes, and more, visit writergroupie.net.